Hello, and welcome to the next tour, episode 11 with Ian.
And Andia.
And we are joined here by Hana Romer to discuss transition in mental health awareness. So much like anything mental health related, it can be a tough subject, but it's a necessary subject to talk about. So Andia, why don't you introduce our wonderful guest here?
Great. Thank you so much. So Hana Romer, as Ian said, was in the Marine Corps for 10 years. She separated in November of 2012. Her spouse is still in the Marine Corps, correct? I don't think I ever asked you that. I just assumed. She was a staff sergeant and separated as an E6, and she is currently the Senior Director of Outreach and Recruiting for VA's mental health awareness campaign, Make the Connection. Welcome, Hana. We're super excited to have you here today. Like Ian said, this is kind of a heavy subject, but I think it's one that's super important. You know, we all need to make sure we're taking care of ourselves and our loved ones. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and see you guys.
Excellent. Well, we're excited to have you on. And, as Andia said, heavy subject, and we're glad that you're doing what you do with Make the Connection. Can you really quickly just tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so Make the Connection is the VA's largest mental health awareness campaign. I'd like to call it like a PSA campaign almost, but it's a branch of the VA. The VA started it, they launched it in 2011, and they wanted a way to get the stories of veterans who have overcome mental health barriers and mental health obstacles in short documentary style form. So I don't know if you've ever been on the website, but we have last I checked, over 900 stories of veterans who have shared their experiences with mental health and then how getting help has helped them get into a better headspace and live a long, healthy, happy life. And so I guess the whole purpose of the campaign is in the veteran community, they're always being preached at to go, hey, mental health is important. Go seek help. But we tend to be a little bit stubborn in taking advice from people who have not been in our shoes. And so hoping that through the stories of fellow veterans, they can see themselves in someone who has come out on the other side and at least plant the seed in their mind to go get help and destigmatize mental health just in general.
Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. That's such an incredible way to change the narrative and flip the script a little bit on that.
Yeah.
Because I've had my own mental health journeys, while on active duty and, even following my transition. So kind of to that end, transition is tough. You did it yourself. At some point your husband is going to do it. You'll do it as a family. Can you talk a little bit about, perhaps your journey with mental health and why you continue to give back in your capacity with Make the Connection?
Yeah. So as far as mental health, my own mental health journey, I feel like, so I served between 2002 and 2012, which seems like so long ago, but I feel like right around the time I was getting out of the military was when mental health was really being pushed to the forefront in conversations, because I am a post 9/11 generation Marine. And so we were having post 9/11 veterans who are now transitioning out of military service and dealing with a lot of mental health issues. And so while I was in, I feel like it was still very stigmatized and not talked about. And I cannot, in my entire 10 years, remember any of my leaders or fellow Marines like going to seek mental health treatment. And I feel like now my husband's still active duty and I see them so openly talk about it at work and going to their therapy appointments. And it's so much more normalized than it was. And so it wasn't until, so I started mental health treatment right before I got out of the military. I was struggling. I was a Marine Corps recruiter for a little bit and duty was very challenging. And so I started some therapy then, but it wasn't until I transitioned out of the military when I feel like everything just kind of hit me at once. We thought we were prepared financially, but losing half of an income so suddenly was like very detrimental to our family's financial health. On top of the fact that I was losing like a part of my identity and a part of myself. And so I I want to say that I always tell people that first year was probably the hardest year of my life out of all 10 years I served. My combat deployments, like transitioning was 10 times more difficult than that. And I feel like that's when I hit rock bottom. And when I hit rock bottom, that was when my marriage hit rock bottom too. Cause, when the veteran transitions, the family goes through it. And my husband was still active duty at the time. And I was so ready to get out, but then I also had resentment watching him put on his uniform and go to work every day. And that was very difficult for me to watch because I felt like, hey, that was like my life. And I felt like he was living my life, even though I was ready to get out. And so I feel like when we hit our rock bottom is when our marriage was kind of falling apart. And I don't even remember how mental health became a thing, but we were just like, both of us need therapy. And I started going on my own, and my therapist actually suggested that I bring my husband to therapy because she was like, I think that this is something you guys both need to do together. And my husband started going on his own. So we were both going on our own and then also together to do marriage counseling. And what we found was during that time, my husband had also some unresolved issues from combat. He was dealing with PTSD and survivor's guilt. And this had just kind of been, I feel like we were just like going through life pretending like it didn't exist. And my transition kind of brought it all out to the forefront because he was angry at me and I was angry at him. And we didn't know where all this anger was coming from. And therapy really just kind of helped us unpack that trauma. And it was like a year's long work where it was very difficult. It was not a happy time in our marriage. And I know your daughter goes to MIT. My husband, we were stationed in Boston. My husband was the assistant Marine officer instructor for the Boston Consortium.
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so we were stationed in Boston, and what would be such a cool duty station because like no Marines ever get to go to like Boston. I always think of that time, and I had such a negative connotation attached to Boston because of what we had gone through as a family. But on the other side of it, because now we've kind of made it on the other side of our mental health journey, we're going there for spring break, and I'm like, I feel like redo, and we're taking our kids. Like our kids don't even remember that time because they were so little. So, but yeah, that's kind of like my mental health journey.
It's really incredible to see you be vulnerable on camera like this. But I think you brought to light some really incredible things and important things to talk about, the culture piece of what's going on inside the ranks today and that shift, because I saw it myself as well, where at first it was, all about, hey, don't take a knee, it's weakness, to now it's, hey, take a knee because we need you ready. And we need you to be able to show others around you that it's okay, to get better. And so many points you bring up there about the family, and having transition, really kind of highlight all of it all at once, all the time. Right. And we experienced a lot of that as well. So thank you so much for helping share that.
Yeah. And I think it's so important too. Leaders at all levels, I think, are so much more open to talk about it now as well. And even I remember you going to appointments and, making sure people knew where you were going for your mental health appointments. And I think that's such an important concept. And it has, really changed over time. And I really appreciate you sharing all of this also, Hannah. I think it's the more we talk about it, the more we destigmatize the the ability for people to go and get help. Sorry.
Yeah.
a little like frog in my throat.
And when you were going to your appointments, you would make sure people knew. So my husband at our 2 duty stations ago in Yuma, when he had Marines, now he works in an office, so he doesn't really have like a lot of Marines. But the last unit he had where he was leading Marines, they had like this whiteboard at their work where, if you're going to be gone for the day or going to an appointment, you just have to write where you're going to be at, if you're going to be back, what time. And he talked about how important it was that when he went to therapy, he didn't just write on the board that he's going to medical. He wrote specifically going to therapy, and I'll be at, 1300 or whatever. And it was important to him that his Marines saw that he was, number one, actively in therapy, and also like, it's not a big deal. And
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's like the electrical system on a car. If there's a gremlin in there, it can affect so many other things. So, we work to fix our cars to make them run. Why do we not, oftentimes think that it's important to do that with our own bodies and our own minds? So, yeah, I really applaud that. And thanks for what you both continue to do to advocate for mental health for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the other questions we wanted to sort of dig into a little bit more was barriers to getting help, real or perceived. Sorry, I don't know. It's still going on in my throat. But I think it's really important to kind of dig into those a little bit. We do have, we put up barriers for all sorts of things. And I think understanding and unpacking those and realizing that maybe they are, they're not real, or some that really are real. So yeah, if you could dig into that a little bit.
Yeah. So I would say most of the barriers that I face were within myself. So they're perceived barriers. So as a Marine, I was kind of trained to think service to others before yourself, and in leadership, you're always taught to take care of others before yourself, take care of your troops. And so when it came to taking care of my own self and my own mental health, it felt very unnatural to me and also felt a little selfish, right? And I also have a little bit of imposter syndrome when it comes to my own service. My husband is a Purple Heart recipient and has traumatic brain injury. And so like, it's always like, well, that's the guy that needs like mental health treatment. And it's like he was on the front lines in combat where I was more in a supporting role, and that his military experience is so vastly different from mine. And so there's a little bit of imposter syndrome. And I think that was something that I had told myself in my head, like whatever I'm going through, it's not as bad as what he has been through and what he is going through. And it took really a while for me to realize that, like, this isn't the stuff, I call it the suffering Olympics. I feel like that's very common in military and veteran community. And it's like, just because someone's always going to have it worse than you, but it doesn't mean you don't deserve the same level of care and dignity when it comes to taking care of your mental health. And so that was something that was like a me problem. And that was something that I really had to work on within myself and convince myself basically that, I deserve this health care. I deserve to take care of my mental health, and especially for my family, for our children and for my marriage. That's something that's very important. So I think that's kind of a perceived barrier, and probably what took me so long to seek mental health. I should have been in mental health probably long before I got out of the military. But in the military, there's always like, oh, well, did you deploy? If you didn't deploy, then you didn't do anything. And what your mental health issues made up in your head. I mean, and there's all this stigma. So I think that's like my perceived barrier. And then actual barriers, it's really just the bureaucracy of going through the VA. The VA can be very daunting and challenging to navigate if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know the right people. And so that is an actual barrier. And I think this is a problem in both the military veteran sector and the civilian sector. There's a lack of mental health care providers. So it's veterans who are having maybe wait times to get an appointment. I hear it in the civilian sector as well. So, once I got in at my VA here, my appointments are pretty regular, but it took a while to get into that first appointment.
Right.
Right.
got in, it's been pretty regular and it's been great. So I think
Good.
that's the only actual barrier that I have faced. And I think it's something that both veterans and non-veterans are experiencing right now when it comes to mental health care.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
speaking of that actual barrier that you talked about being able to get in, particularly when it comes to, after a family has transitioned, right? After you transitioned, family members and spouses, can you talk a little bit about, overcoming that actual barrier? Where can you recommend that spouses, family members actually go to seek those resources to get those doors open for them and get in and actually get the help that they need and deserve?
So I feel like I have such an unique situation going on because my spouse is still active duty. And so I can use both TRICARE and VA Health. I use VA Health for my mental health care just because I like everything all in one place because I do get disability benefits. And so just getting everything from the VA as it correlates to my disability is just easier for me.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I guess the question wasn't necessarily, made to put you on the spot, but I think rather what it did is it highlighted the fact that things can be challenging after transition. Things can be challenging out there in the civilian world. So, I think that's the whole point of why that question is really important for this podcast, right? And the whole reason why we do this next tour piece of it and bring in folks is to just highlight the intricacies and the challenges of navigating all of this while you're in uniform, after you've taken the uniform off, and even long after you've done that transition, things can still be difficult. So being able to just highlight the different resources that are out there and point folks into different directions, that's again at the genesis of why we wanted to do this. So again, a good flag to bring up in this context.
I guess that transition, it is very focused on the veteran, right?
Mhm.
But, and I've talked about this in other advocacy groups that I've been in, but it's really not looked at enough as a whole family thing.
Mhm.
Are thinking about the spouse, or if there's children, if there's grown children who may not fall under your insurance anymore, like all of this stuff is probably not as talked about as it should be. The focus has always been solely on the one person that's transitioning, but if they have a family, it affects the entire family. So I think that's definitely kind of a hole in the system where someone is being maybe left behind a little bit, an entire, part of the nuclear family that is getting out.
For sure.
Yeah. I think it's really important. And you highlighted this also because status makes a difference, right? Because if you're a military spouse on the active duty side, you can reach out to Military One Source, right? They're kind of the belly button. You can go there and get all sorts of resources. But then, you switch if you're separating, you don't have you now probably have civilian healthcare of some kind. And then, we don't really understand even how to navigate that. And then retirees, we still have TRICARE. We have TRICARE Select now, which we're still navigating how that works. But I think there are status makes a difference. And I think you're right with family members also, how can we make sure that we're getting that that healthcare that we need in those different moments in our lives during that life cycle of transition. So we'll definitely drop some resources for the episode to help people navigate that, because I do think it's super important. And I just wanted to go back to one thing you said earlier, which was the military Olympics, or however you said that.
The Suffering Olympics.
Yeah.
Suffering Olympics. That's how you said it. And I think, gosh, I mean, that just resonates with me so much. I think whenever we're dealing with any kind of trauma, we always try to compare ourselves to other people, and we just all need to stop doing that, right? Your trauma is your trauma, no matter, it is all about how it's impacting you. It does not have to do with anyone else. So I'm gonna totally steal that. Suffering Olympics. I remember that one. So then I guess our last kind of formal question for you is thinking about Nick's transition, coming up in just a couple of years, right?
2 years.
2 years. So
That's what he says. So
It's going to be here before you know it. Yeah.
yeah.
That's what he says. I love that. So, so expecting that in a couple of years or so, what are your perceived pain points as you think about that transition? Of course, your family is a little bit different because you are a veteran or, as well, but thinking about that holistically, pain points that you're thinking about already. And then, maybe even in the mental health or otherwise, what are your thoughts there?
So I feel like this is a conversation we've been ongoing. It's like an ongoing conversation because I am very type A and I'm a planner and I need to know, dates and I need to know when. Next, he is very much a go with the flow. It's going to work. He's always like, it's going to work out. It always works out. And I'm like, that's not good enough for me. That answer is not good enough for me. And so I feel like us getting ready for him to retire is more stressful for me than him. And, but I also think because we have gone through my transition, he is very aware of how difficult that is. And I am extremely grateful that he has decided to take charge of his mental health. And he's been actively in therapy for several years now. He has a therapist that he goes to regularly that he's been talking about transition and how that's going to impact our family. And so I feel like in a way he is miles ahead of where I was when I was getting ready to, and a lot better prepared than I am. And I also feel that now that because we're older and I have an established career, the financial impact isn't going to be as devastating as it was when I got out. And so those are all things that makes me feel better. But also at the same time, he's been in 23 years now. So this is this has truly only been his identity since he was 17 years old. And that also gives me a little bit of worry, wondering how it's going to impact him when that's it's taken away from him. And, you really never know how it's going to impact somebody until they go through it. And so that I'm just remaining cautiously optimistic about that he's going to be fine because he's been in therapy. But I think, I think he's done a really great job of preparing himself. And so that gives me a little bit of rest in my soul, just a little bit.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. And I think your own experience, I mean, that makes sense, right? Your own experience with that, it's took you to a low place. So I mean, I love cautiously optimistic though is a great way to be. I think you guys are well prepared as much as you can be, and talking about it. And it sounds like you guys are really have been doing a lot lot of that.
Well, the fact that, you guys can play off of each other and have that team doing it, so it's not completely unknown is really important, and I guess, again, it goes back to the whole reason why we decided to do this endeavor is to be able to share resources and make that landing a lot easier, and stick the landing for everybody, if you will, 10s all the way across the board, to use a gymnastics vernacular.
There you go. We're just keeping the Olympics going.
Yeah, exactly. So, I think that's really important. So, kind of to that end, though, I think at this point we'd like to transition into the I guess the fun side of this part of the podcast.
I think it's time for some fun.
I think you're up first.
I am. So this is a game we play. It's called What's in Your Rucksack. So the idea is, your perceived rucksack from perceived. I've used that word too much this morning.
That's a good one. Roll with it.
I guess I'll just roll with it. So your rucksack from military life to civilian life, what would you bring with you from your military life to civilian life, and what would you leave behind?
Okay, so I had to think about this for a while. So what I would leave behind is craving validation from others in tangible ways. And I say that because in the military, you are rewarded with medals and ribbons when you do something good, good job, and then they do a whole formation and you're recognized in front of all of your peers for this great job you did. And I feel like that's also how service members, when they're in uniform, are always sizing each other up based on what's on their chest. And dumb, right? And so like that is something I would leave back. It's like you don't need validation in a tangible form like that. And then something I would take with me from the military, and this is something I guess it's kind of funny, but it would be the ability to fall asleep anywhere and be rested.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
Yeah, because I feel like since I got out, like, I mean, maybe it's sleep apnea, I don't know, but I was like when I was young, I could like fall asleep anywhere in the most uncomfortable positions, places, and like wake up and like feel great. Like that was a great power snooze. And I feel like I don't have that anymore. So if I could bring that back with me, I
Oh, to be young again.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I love that. That's so funny. Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could do that still. Yeah. Now I like throw my back out like reaching for something. It's crazy. Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you for that. That was fun.
Yeah.
All right. So my turn is we're going to do the 2 truths and a lie military style. So last episode, we had former senior enlisted advisor to the chairman, Ramon Colon Lopez, or CZ. So I'm going to give you the opportunity to review his answers and give us your best guess on which one was the lie. Okay. So first one. CZ grew up with parents that didn't have very much, but they made sure he had every opportunity in life. Number 2, regardless of what he did, whether it was in his personal life or his military career, he was always the best at everything. And number 3, the greatest lesson he learned in his military career is to live by the code of humility. Which one is the lie?
I think it would be number 2, because I feel like if he's a humble guy. I don't think I was the best at everything.
Yep, you nailed it.
Yeah, absolutely. You nailed that one. We had that in mind as well. So yep, that was definitely the lie.
Yeah. He made it too easy on everybody, I think. But I think it just kind of goes to the character of, who he is and what he brings to the table. So, okay. So Hannah, over to you. What are your 2 truths and a lie? And we'll reveal that answer on the next episode of the next tour.
Okay. So I met my husband on the rifle range and we eloped 6 weeks later.
Okay.
And then my second fact is on recruiting duty. I was the first woman Marine to win Rookie Recruiter of the Year. And then my third fact, well, they're not all facts, but my third thing is I know how to build rockets.
Huh.
Ooh.
All 3 of those, knowing your background a little bit, I think could be very, very, very plausible. So we'll reveal that on the next one. And
yeah, absolutely. Hannah, thank you so much for being here with us today to have this really important conversation, to take the time to be vulnerable with us. We really do appreciate having you here. And also, to everyone out there, check out Make the Connection. Also, we're going to share some stuff in the notes for different resources that you shared with us, and we'll add some more in there as well. But thanks so much for being here with us today, Hannah.
Thank you
Absolutely.
for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. And again, thanks for what you continue to do for our veteran community, their families, and just best of luck to you guys as you approach that next transition for your family and how that
and your next tour.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, everybody, don't forget to follow us on YouTube. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. Please like, subscribe, comment. Let us know what you want us to talk about and continue to talk about. You can find us on the nexttourpodcast.com. And you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, and Audible. And we will see you next time on the next tour. The views, opinions, and advice expressed by our guest on the next tour are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the podcast, Andia, or any affiliated organizations. While we strive to provide helpful and accurate information, this podcast is for informational purposes only. We encourage listeners to consult with professionals or conduct their own research before making any significant decisions related to military transition or post-service life. The content is intended as guidance and personal perspective, not as official advice.